Deep within the shadowed forest where sunlight barely pierces the thick canopy, a jaguar prowls silently, a symbol of primal strength and grace. But not all is majestic in this hidden world. This magnificent beast bears a grotesque burden, a nightmarish wound festering with parasites, creeping organisms that have turned her flesh into a rotting haven. This jaguar's body serves as a battleground, where microscopic invaders wage a relentless war upon her vitality, feeding on her from the inside out, an unsettling testament to nature's dark underbelly. The wound itself, a gaping orifice surrounded by torn skin and raw meat, is a grotesque tableau of decay. Upon closer inspection, writhing masses of larvae pulsate with nauseating life, their translucent bodies shimmering faintly in the dim light. These maggots infest the jaguar's flesh, burrowing deeper as they devour tissue and fluids in a parasitic feast that shows no mercy. The pain, though invisible to us, must be agonizing, each movement carrying a sickening squelch, a disturbing soundtrack to the continuous destruction happening beneath the surface. Parasite infestation, or parasitosis, is a brutal, insidious process that reveals some harsh truths about survival in the wild. Parasites, ranging from tiny larvae like those afflicting our jaguar to blood-sucking ticks and burrowing mites, exploit their host's body for sustenance and shelter. They insert themselves beneath the skin or embed into blood vessels, feeding off blood, tissues, or bodily fluids. In this jaguar, a combination of botfly larvae and possibly flesh-eating bacteria have conspired to produce a perfect storm of decay. The botfly, torn from myth and nightmare alike, lays eggs on the jaguar's fur. These eggs hatch into larvae that crawl beneath the skin, carving out winding tunnels that destroy tissue as the larvae feed. Over time, the wound grows larger and more infected, a festering reservoir of life and death intertwined. What makes this infestation grotesque is not just the visual horror, but the chemical warfare waging invisibly. In the remote stretches of the African wilderness, where the golden savanna stretches unbroken beneath an uncaring sun, there exists a rarity, both magnificent and macabre: the white lion. This rare creature, its fur ghostly pale against the green and ochre backdrop, should symbolize purity and mystery. Instead, it bears a wound so grotesque it seems almost surreal, a barnacle-like infestation riddling its tawny skin with crusty, unyielding plates. This horrific lesion, a grotesque bumpy mass thickened with hardened calcium shells clinging relentlessly to its flesh, starkly contrasts the soft elegance of the lion's mane. What you are about to witness is not just a tale of nature's splendor, but the dark, unsettling story of life and death waging war on a single magnificent beast. This wound is more than a mere injury. It is a battlefield where parasitism reigns supreme. Barnacles, typically ocean dwellers grasping at rocks, and ships have somehow found their way, or something eerily similar, in the form of parasitic crustaceans and other ectoparasites onto this terrestrial giant. These parasites burrow into the lion's skin, embedding themselves deeply, their harsh, shell-like bodies excreting maimed sebum and pumice like debris that harden into scabbed armor. The lion's wound oozes with a fetid mix of pus, blood, and decaying tissue, attracting flies and other scavengers, turning the majestic predator into a grotesque monument of decay. This unholy infestation does not merely sit on the surface. It invades the bloodstream, sapping vitality and creating a constant source of agony and infection. Peering closer, one sees the crustacean's jagged limbs, gripping the lion's tissue with a sinister determination that defies nature's usual balance. Each parasite forms a miniature fortress, shell after calcified shell, layering over the raw skin and thickening the mass in an ever-growing cluster of coral-like nightmare. Beneath these shells, bacteria thrive in a warm, fetid swamp, turning flesh to mush and inviting secondary infections that inch towards systemic collapse. The lion's immune system, overwhelmed, sends waves of white blood cells only to find themselves trapped in swirling crescents of pus. And in the dense heart of a jungle where silence ought to reign, a hidden horror festers on the living flesh of a majestic apex predator, a jaguar, its dappled coat a canvas now marred by grotesque, pulsating cocoons. These pods, grotesque and swollen with wicked intent, cling tightly to the animal's skin, a living tapestry of parasitic invasion. At first glance, the jaguar's fierce amber eyes betray no sign of suffering, but a closer observation reveals the unbearable burden it carries. The vivid bulges sprout like malevolent flowers of decay, the jagged edges of ruptured skin oozing a foul, thick exudate that stains the once pristine fur, a sickening ochre. This is no mere blemish. It is a biological nightmare, a battlefield where survival has become a grotesque dance between host and parasite. Beneath the jaguar's muscular frame lies an entirely different ecosystem, where larval parasites embed themselves deeply within the dermis, slowly feeding on their unwilling host's vital fluids. These parasites are not simply hitchhikers, but insidious invaders, adapted through evolution to exploit a terrifying niche. The gruesome art of corpse making in a living animal. Each cocoon, a sinister cradle, harbors a cluster of larvae growing blind, and fat on the jaguar's blood supply, pushing the skin outward in horrific, pulsating mounds. The jaguar's immune system, relentless in its fight, floods the infected area with white blood cells, inadvertently creating a kind of incubator that protects the parasites even as it tries to destroy them. This symphony of decay is silent and unseen. Beneath the sweltering sun of the savannah, hidden in the shadows of tall, dry grasses, a rare and haunting sight disrupts the timeless rhythm of the wild. A black lion, its inky mane those of a spectral predator, crouches low, wounded and ravaged by an enemy unseen to the untrained eye. This is no ordinary injury. The flesh is torn and festering, an open wound crawling with parasites that feast and multiply in grotesque communion. It's a scene that shocks the senses and unsettles the mind, a vivid display of nature's darker edge, where life and death entwine in the most disgusting yet fascinating embrace. The black lion's wound is a gruesome landscape. Flies buzz relentlessly, depositing eggs that soon hatch into larvae, writhing like sinister threadworms beneath the skin. These maggots burrow deeper, carving tunnels into the soft tissues, feeding on decaying flesh and bodily fluids, turning the injury into a living hell. The stench of decay pervades the air, a sickly sweet mix of rot and damp earth, signaling the ongoing battle between the lion's failing immune system and the parasitic invaders. Other parasites, tiny but no less vicious, cling to the lion's mane and hide in the folds of its skin, drawing blood and transmitting infections. The lion, once a majestic apex predator, now becomes a reluctant host to swarms of vile creatures whose survival depends entirely on its suffering. Parasite infestation on creatures like this lion is a stark reminder of nature's brutal indifference. Parasites range from protozoans and nematodes deep inside the organs to external ticks, lice, and flies festering on the skin. Each type employs a particular strategy for survival. Some quietly siphon nutrients, weakening their host over time, while others wreak havoc rapidly, inflaming wounds and spawning secondary infections. The parasite's life cycles are often intertwined with the host's biology, casting a web of dependency and dread. The lion's immune defenses battle tirelessly, white blood cells attack invaders, inflammation floods tissues, and the animal's behavior changes as pain and weakness set in. Yet, despite these efforts, parasite success stories are countless, carving their niche in the relentless evolutionary game of survival. This black lion, a rare melanistic individual already a marvel to behold, now embodies the tragic vulnerability. Imagine, deep in the murky, stagnant waters of the Amazon, where sunlight barely pierces the thick canopy, a silent predator glides with terrifying grace. Here dwells the anaconda, a colossal serpent whose monstrous size and power have inspired awe for centuries. Yet beneath its sleek, greenish-black scales lies a most grotesque secret, a festering wound crawling with parasites, a vivid testament to the dark, unseen battles waged in this shadowy aquatic realm. The anaconda's wound pulses with a sickly rhythm, a living nightmare in its own right. Swollen and oozing, the flesh is disrupted by writhing colonies of parasitic invaders, each one a miniature horror thriving on the serpent's misery. These parasites, microscopic nematodes, leeches, and crustacean-like hitchhikers, have burrowed into the anaconda's tissue, feeding on its blood, bodily fluids, and sometimes even bits of muscle, leaving gaping sores that refuse to heal. The skin around the infected area ripples unnaturally as the parasites move beneath, their brittle legs scraping on raw flesh, their needle-like mouths drawing sustenance in a relentlessly grotesque feast. Parasite infestation in an anaconda is not merely a tale of one animal's suffering, but an intimate glimpse into the complex, often horrifying web of nature's parasitic relationships. Parasites exploit their hosts through cunning biological strategies honed by millennia, manipulating physiology and behavior to ensure their own survival at the expense of the victim's vitality. In the humid dark of the jungle, parasites hitch rides on amphibians or tiny fish, eventually transferring to the anaconda as it feeds, a gruesome cocktail of relentless invasion. What makes these infestations so disturbing is their resilience. The immune system of such a mighty snake, despite its strength and adaptability, can be overwhelmed by the sheer number and diversity of parasites burrowing into its body. The lesions become in the vast expanse of the prairie, where the wind carves the landscape and time seems to pause. There moves a creature burdened not by the majesty of survival, but by a grotesque testament to nature's less romantic side. Here stands a bison, its once proud coat now matted and sullied by a wound so horrific it seems almost alien. The flesh is torn and ragged, a raw canvas marred by a dark, festering colony of parasites, writhing in a macabre dance upon its suffering hide. This is no mere scratch or nick. It is a vivid saga of decay and endurance writ large on the body of an animal that embodies the wild spirit of a continent. Parasites, those unseen hitchhikers of the natural world, have claimed this bison with ruthless efficiency. The disfigurement is the result of an infestation by a particular breed of flies, perhaps botflies or warbleflies, whose larvae have embedded themselves beneath the skin. These invaders lay eggs on the bison's fur, which hatch into larvae that burrow deep, carving tunnels and devouring tissue as they grow, secreting enzymes that liquefy flesh and create an environment ripe for infection. The wound oozes thick, yellowish pus, the byproduct of immune cells and decaying skin, while the buzzing of adult flies hovers like a grim soundtrack to the ongoing assault. Tenants surrounding hair falls away, revealing swollen, inflamed flesh, permeated by dark clotted blood and crusted scabs, the bodily fortress breached and defiled by its unwelcome tenants. This brutal parasite-host interaction is both a story of biological survival and relentless destruction. The larvae rely on the nutrients from the bison's flesh to complete their life cycle, inching ever closer to maturation, even as they erode the bison's capacity to thrive. The wound, while repulsive, is a niche of evolution's indifferent logic, each microscopic invader fulfilling a role in a complex web